Welcome to the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm your host, Danny Gavin, and together with industry leaders and marketing experts, we'll explore the meeting point of mentorship and marketing. We'll discover how these connections have affected careers, marketing strategies, and lives. Now get ready to get human. Hello, everyone. I'm Danny Gavin, founder of Optage, marketing professor, and the host of the Digital Marketing Mentor. I am really excited to introduce our special guest today, Alison Reeves, who's the CEO of AlisonReeves.co. Blogging since 2011 and business coaching since 2017, Alison Reeves helps entrepreneurs scale their income by combining business coaching, aligned marketing, and mindset restoration. Her business is to help people make more money, but her mission is to help people love their lives. Today, we're going to be talking about mentorship, content marketing, a little bit about podcasting, and audience borrowing and social media. How are you doing, Alison?
I'm good. I have to say, it is so wonderful to see you.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing. In your life, you meet like lots of different people. And I think we've only met in person once, but I feel like we've spoken a lot, right? In general, I think throughout like the past 10 years, sometimes you make a special connection. And I think that, you know, we've had that in the past, and it's just really nice to have you and to speak again.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about your background, where you went to school and what you studied.
So from Houston. I'm from New Jersey originally, but I consider myself a Houstonian. And I went to school, and here in Houston, I was looking for, at the time, I was really involved in my church, wanted to be a missionary that specialized in linguistics. And in order to get into that master's, I had to have a degree from anywhere, in anything.
Wow.
So I looked for the most affordable accredited degree I could find, which was at a Bible college off of the Southwest Freeway called the College of Biblical Studies. So that's why I went to school, and I got a degree, bachelor's in arts in leadership from there, which indirectly kind of ended up launching my career because I figured out that I didn't want to be a missionary, but I was working for 3 vice presidents and stumbled into marketing and got promoted. So it all kind of still worked out to figure out my career, just not the way that I thought.
And College of Biblical Studies, that is not Houston Baptist University. That's a separate college?
Totally separate.
Totally
Yep.
different.
Yeah.
Cool. I believe I've seen signs for it, but I don't know if I noticed it that much. Obviously, so going to get that bachelor's, it was really just a stepping stool to get into the next situation. But were there any experiences inside and outside the classroom that you feel like when you look back were impactful to where you are today?
Oh yeah, I had one professor. I was a really good student, and I was also really good at doing the minimum amount of work. So I never really felt like I was a great student because I felt like I was always kind of hacking the least effort, for better or worse. But I had one professor tell me that I was a really good writer. And in high school too, I never took any advanced classes. My grades were good, but it was always, again, I was like doing the minimum to get the maximum. My sister was in all these advanced classes and went above and beyond. So it never occurred to me that I was a good writer. And that instilled so much confidence in me, and it really had an impact on a lot of what I do today. I think all the time, like, I'm a good writer, and I do a lot of writing. So it's helpful to have a little bit of confidence there. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's just so important, right? Like you go throughout high school so many years, but like what you remember is the key that changed, like opened up the world of writing for you was, you know, a compliment at college. It's so powerful. I mean, it's sad that you didn't get that earlier on, but the fact that you got that and that was the motivation, I think that's really cool.
I don't think I gave myself the opportunity to receive that early on. I was just kind of focused on getting through. And so what a relevant comment for this podcast too. Just the impact of like a good word from someone that you respect.
And I think sometimes people are so busy, we forget to give those compliments. And so we have to be very present in our relationships. So I think this is a great lesson. Let's move into mentorship. Alison, how would you define a mentor?
I would define a mentor as someone who can both show you the way, but also help you find your way.
And do you want to elaborate that a bit?
No. Yeah. So and I think this will come out too in some of the other conversations you and I were alluding to earlier, is like, I think a lot of the mentors, or like the way that I used to mentor in business coaching, especially, it was like somebody came to me, I would form an opinion as fast as I could on what I thought the most profitable thing would be for them to do, like as soon as possible. And then I would just put a lot of pressure on them to do that thing. I'd put a lot of pressure on them through high prices, fast timelines, and that worked until it didn't. Because what happens when you push somebody into something, even if it ends up being successful, if it's not aligned, then they can get overwhelmed, they can burn out, their nervous system can literally get dysregulated. And so I had a turning point in my own life where it led to a change, not just in how I was coaching people, but the kind of coaching I sought out. And it's a lot more sustainable to teach someone. It's kind of like teaching someone how to fish versus, what is that saying? Give a man well, whatever the saying is, you guys know the saying. But when you help somebody learn how to lead themselves, they have much more sustainable results than like putting a lot of pressure on someone. So where there is urgency, there's often not sustainability.
So let's go down that path a little bit of, like you said, you had some mentors or coaches, right, that weren't so great, maybe a little bit toxic. And I think a lot of people, especially in like the business world on LinkedIn and social media, they're seeing these mentors or coaches, who charge a lot of money, share a lot of reviews, and it's very, I don't know if the word's addictive, but it's like very mesmerizing. So let's unpack that a little bit, because I'm sure we all see that.
Yeah.
What do you think's wrong with that? What did maybe you appreciate at the beginning, but then saw there's something not right here?
So one of the most impactful coaching relationships I had was a really big investment, and it was a really big investment. It was $9,800 in
Wow.
2019, and it was an 8-week program, and I not only did it ROI, but then I was doing like pretty consistent 10K months after that. And then eventually was growing beyond that. And so some of the things that worked in that were the things that ended up being a problem later on. So there's a short timeline, a big price point. So I felt like a lot of pressure to make the thing work. And then I made it work. And so I learned a lot about mindset and self-belief in that coaching program, which is the thing that I was missing that I didn't know before. I always thought mindset work was kind of baloney. I'm like, just show me the strategies so I can do the thing. But that was really impactful. And like the belief that I could do it helped lead me to finally be able to do the thing. What I think gets toxic is so a lot of people were learning from them and a lot of people copied that strategy. But in the online mentorship space specifically, like I never encountered this when I was like going to in-person masterminds only, like before I got really involved in the online world. But I think in the online world, because people have the potential to have so much reach, and you have access to so much more, there's just like this weird culture that was created where not only do people get addicted to the results, but people can also get addicted to, like, what happened for me was I almost became what I would call addicted to masterminds, because that feeling of pressure that got me results, I thought that was like the way to do things forever. So I kind of went into this like spiral of like spending more and more and more to make the same amount. Like I was making more in my business, but I wasn't taking home anymore. And like there's two things that happen. One is like a toxic sales culture that's like high pressure, no guarantees, like, which I think no guarantees is normal in coaching. But if you're going to have high pressure sales tactic, you can put people in a risky situation. But there's also this like pyramid thing that happens in the online coaching space every now and then too, where like this person's teaching this person and this person is teaching this person, this person, your goal is almost to kind of like move up to the most expensive person. I think that's happening less now. There's more transparency. Like people are having these conversations about a lack of transparency in the online coaching world, where some people are spiritual mentors who are promoting themselves as business mentors, and there's nothing specific that they're teaching. Or I just said like 10,000 things. I'm going to pause there and let you see where you want to go from there.
No, it's amazing. It sparked a lot in my head. I think it sounds like a drug. It's kind of like you got addicted to this system, and it's like the only way that I can continue doing it is if I keep paying money, to be part of these groups. That's kind of scary. It's kind of like you're at a point where the only way I can continue is if I spend. Like that's a difficult spot to be in.
Yeah, it got me, and it definitely got me in a hole, and it was painful. And then the getting out of that or learning, I think I would have kept, and part of this is like overly relying on strategy. So I tried a strategy that worked, And when I wanted to make more, it was almost like I would abandon that strategy and move on. So that was another problem, was I was kind of losing some of my stick-to-itiveness by hopping from mentor to mentor. But then the process of unlearning that was painful. And then the process of learning to lead myself was empowering, but also painful. It was like, oh, because I think part of the addiction, I call it addiction,
Yeah.
to the mastermind was almost like trusting other people more than myself for the answer. I think I would have stayed in that cycle if I didn't hit a wall where it's like it worked until it didn't. Like investing big with a tight timeline to put a lot of pressure on yourself works until it doesn't. And then that, one mastermind didn't work out, and then we're like, maybe the next one will. And then 2 of those in a row is a lot to not work out. So I think I would have stayed in that cycle if I didn't get to a place financially where it was like, we literally cannot sustain this anymore. And I had to ask, okay, this is obviously not the way. So I've got to learn a new way. And the new way was working on my mindset and my nervous system again, which is a big conversation, and then learning to lead myself.
And being in that world, do you feel like a lot of people go through it? Like, have you spoken to people who kind of go through the same thing?
Yeah. And actually, a colleague of mine who we started growing right around the same time. We have a lot of overlap in our audiences. Her name is Faith Mariah. She's wonderful. But we've had conversations where she didn't get into the same cycle that I did, but I think she's pretty public about having joined a mastermind that she got some value from. But then also when she finished, she had to do a lot of unlearning and I think it's probably similar to what I'm talking about, where there are some mentors who teach it's a toxic mindset culture. I don't even know how to describe it, where, it's not realistic. It's not aligned. It doesn't help people tune into themselves. And that's what I think good mentorship is like, you have to learn how to lead yourself and figure out what's right for you. Because the bottom line is that at the end of the day, it all works for someone. So if you don't give the thing a long enough chance to work, it will never work. And that's when people don't know how to trust themselves or make decisions for themselves. Then again, like, you never have a sustainable business because you're always trying to find somebody else with the answer.
So I think it's a good time to segue into the mentor who had the most impact on you. So where I believe less strategy, but more spirituality. Let's talk about them.
Yeah. So kind of at the end of the cycle where I realized I needed to change what I was doing, I'm like, I don't know what the answer is, but the answer is not the thing I've been doing, which is like tons and tons and tons of strategy. So the coach that made the biggest impact for me, she's actually a psychic medium, but she's also a life coach. And I was really attracted to, I got like a clarity reading for her, which I'd never done any kind of reading quite like that. But the biggest insight from that reading was like, I've got to learn to lean into what I want. Like, my brand should be me and not like a piece of this person, a piece of this person, a piece of this person. And so I worked with her I did one call with her, and then she has a mentorship called Spirit Led Life, which I did. It was a 4-week mentorship on just like tuning back into yourself. And that was in June of 2022. And I've been working with her ever since then. And it's just, what made that so powerful was that she could answer questions for me and support me, emotionally and with strategy. But her main goal always is just returning home to myself. And I think that's also why I've been with her for so long. Like, I'd never stayed with someone for so long because I'd kind of get tired of one thing or one energy and then just want to move on to the next thing, where this is just a deepening of my relationship with myself over and over and over again. And then I'm seeing that with my clients too, where like the way that I teach my clients is different, where I don't want to feed them the answer right away. And I'm also seeing that because of the relationship, like the way that I help them has changed, and our relationship has changed, the way that I coach them in their business has changed. They're staying on with me a lot longer. Like, I used to never have renewals in 2021 and before. It's like people pay a lot of money to work with me, and then they might make a lot of money, but then it's like their nervous system is dysregulated. They have to take a long break. Whereas now I see people renewing more often. It's just a totally different, the sustainability of doing things a different way is pretty huge.
I love the idea of being a guide to help someone truly find themselves, and not like, it's not about, the coach or the mentor, but it's about the person you're speaking to. And really, it's like shining a light on those areas and guiding them. And it just makes so much sense. But obviously, you kind of sometimes, to get to that point, You have to go through other things and realize, like this was good, but like you said, like it might be good for a little bit, but if it's not sustainable, then how can one, ethically push that,
I think it's really relevant. Like that type of mentorship is really relevant, not just in like what I'm talking about, which is like online business consulting, but also in the workplace. There's a book called The Coaching Habit. Have you read of that book or heard of
I've
it?
not.
It is a very short read. Like you'll probably read it in a couple of hours. But the whole idea was kind of written more for management than coaches. But it's like if you just feed people the answer, which as coaches, a lot of us know the answer. If you only ever feed people the answer, they will never learn how to find the answer. And so in a management role, your staff can be really disempowered, but also you can just be really busy with no end in sight ever. If you empower them, so instead of giving them the answer, asking them a question, they will increasingly learn how to lead themselves, and it will be less effort for you, better results for them. But that also really impacted the way that I coach people, is helping them, like teaching them to think.
Yeah, we had Jay Steinfeld, who was the founder of blinds.com, eventually was sold out to Home Depot. And I think one of his biggest successes were, he always speaks about the people around him, right? It wasn't just him. But I think the way that he was able to tap into the talent was because he was never telling them what to do. It was all about asking them the right questions and leading them to find the answer on their own. And he was able to, take that and build a $500 million business, if not more. What's interesting, Alison? Technically, you're a coach, but I hear that you're using the word mentor, coach very similarly. Do you feel like there's a difference, or is it the same? At least from your perspective.
From my perspective, I don't distinguish, but I'll say that like it doesn't matter to me. I like the word mentor. I feel like mentor has more like emotion in it, more like I'm holding you. So it's a woo-woo reason. That's why I like the word mentor. But then from a practical perspective, I feel like it's important with clients I've learned to communicate what coaching and mentorship or consulting especially. So what I didn't realize until maybe even just like 6 or 8 months ago is that there is a difference in what you deliver as a coach versus a consultant. And a lot of people don't really know the difference, but the few that do, it's a pretty important difference where like in your relationship with your own mentors and coaches and consultants, or as the mentor, coach, or consultant, it's really important to over communicate what is happening in the container. There's basic contracts which are like, I'm not a therapist, but then there's the more nitty gritty, which is like, I'm not doing the work for you, or I'm doing this part of the work for you, and being as black and white, clear cut as you can on what's provided. So, but what do you think there's a difference in coach and mentor?
Throughout the podcast, we've had different perspectives. I think there's no right or wrong answer. Sometimes I look at mentorship as not necessarily something that you pay for, and it's more, a relationship not related to payment. However, in your case, where people are paying you as a coach, I think mentor makes sense because the style of coaching that you're giving is more mentorship. It's more about, like caring and holding, like you said. So it's like that woo factor. So I don't think there's one way or another. It's just interesting to see the different perspectives. And I think we need to take a little bit from all. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. There's no right or wrong. And on the client facing side, you just have to be super freaking clear.
Yeah. Like in any agency relationship, It's all about the scope, right? It's very clear what I'm going to do, what I'm not going to do, no matter what I call it, because, things can have lots of a lot of packaging, pretty gift wrapping on top of it, but you got to be very clear of what's inside. And that's it. So now talking about how you mentor, let's talk a little bit about how you mentor clients and what you do.
I started marketing consulting in 2017, mostly to real estate agents. And then when my personal blog started taking off, most of my clients were like women solopreneurs. And so love that niche and have been doing that. In 2019, after that mastermind I joined, where the mindset was super impactful, I just started incorporating that into everything that I did. I would say most of my case studies on my results page are people who mention the mindset work specifically. And so I've gotten more and more into that as it's become more important for me, as I've seen it with my clients. So much so that in 2022, I got what's called a somatic coaching certification, which is like body based mindset work, basically. It's like the shortest way to describe it, where we're doing the mindset work, but we're also trying to leverage the body and the nervous system to make it stick. And so when I work with clients, usually what attracts them to me initially is I want to make more money or I want to do this thing in my business. And then the reason why they stay or the reason why they get results, often mindset trickles into it. I would say I do have some clients who we don't end up talking about mindset work, or I call it wealth wounds. So I have like a quiz on like identifying your core wealth wound, which is basically just money mindset issues. But I would say probably 80% of my clients, we wind and weave back and forth between like really traditional business strategy, online business strategy specifically, and then like, oh, we've got a block or a pattern here that we need to figure out. So like we've had this goal for a while and you're either not taking action or you're feeling a lot of insecurity about it or you're so anxious that you can't do anything. So then we'll weave into the mindset and then we'll go back into the strategy. And with all of that, it's question based. So I've also found a big change in my coaching. And I don't know if this is because of my own work or because this is just what's happening in the world. But I find that especially in the last year, like I felt like in 2020 and 2021, people just wanted to like get in and get out. Like I want results as soon as possible. I don't mind spending a lot of money. Whereas now I feel like people really don't want to be in a rush. And that could be me projecting, like I'm not in a hurry anymore. So maybe I'm attracting people who are not in a hurry, but I'm like, so now I used to do like a lot of weekly packages and lots of messaging in between. And now most of my clients we're never meeting more than 3 times a month. We're often meeting twice a month. There's not as much that happens in between calls. It's all about like long-term sustainability. I feel like that patience piece has been really helpful. But yeah, so asking questions, helping people to self-lead, incorporating the mindset, those are really important parts of my work.
I imagine that sometimes people, when they hire a coach, they're expecting, magic to happen without putting in the hard work. Do you ever will you ever fire someone because it's kind of like, they just don't actually do what you guys, decide upon doing. And it's like, what's the point? Does that ever happen?
I've never fired anyone, but I've had people who were unhappy where I could see that it was tied to the action. And I'm also very explicit about what I think someone's potential is to ROI. And also like I have outliers. I have people where I'm like, that would be hard for you to ROI. And then they do. like someone who went viral with a $27 offer. Like, she's my biggest success story. Her results are unrealistic and they're at the bottom of the page. I'm like, this is amazing. And it's obviously possible. I'm not going to tell you that you can repeat this because she doesn't even know how it happened. We just went viral, put advertising behind it, and she did $200,000 in a month.
Wow. We were going to talk about numbers, but I'm glad you told me that number.
Well, yeah, this anonymous, not my numbers.
I'm just joking. So do you think that person who was scared to tell you their expectations, is it just, do you think people are embarrassed sometimes? Like, oh, here's my coach. I don't really want to tell them.
I think it is embarrassment. I think it's hard to speak up or like speak up and be really explicit about, like, I think sometimes people, and I think part of me is projecting here on like, when I go through, because part of what I teach is looking at like resentments. And so like when I was doing this work for myself, I'm like looking at past people I've worked with, past bosses I've had, like what are those resentments? And in hindsight, for me, there was so much like I was the common denominator. And so looking at like what was my part in that, I think people are embarrassed, but I know for me, it's also like not wanting to be overly needy or like dismissing my feelings in a situation to think that like, well, I'm just the only one. So I've just got to try to make it work and figure it out.
But I think the key is naturally, the more transparent you are with your coach, the more you're open, the more they can help you. If you hide anything, it's going to be difficult for them to, help you get to the point that you really need or want to get to. So segueing into content, because we just, talk about content creators. So as an SEO enthusiast myself, in digital marketing, we've been promoting the idea of content is king for a while now. It's the sort of marketing skill that seems to be consistently, to yield results, regardless of how it is utilized, whether you're involved with organic strategy, social media, boosted by advertising. How do you utilize content marketing for your business?
I mean, content marketing is the way that I market. So I just the way that like content marketing for me today is blogging. So like when I was looking at my numbers in 2020 and 2021, almost like 80% of my traffic was from Facebook. Part of that was because of paid ads, and part of that is because I was kind of going all in on my Facebook group. But in 2022, without a lot of effort, like suddenly SEO was my first source of traffic and email list, which I was kind of shook by because I was very half-assy about my SEO strategy on my website. So this year I've been focusing on that, which is obvious content marketing. Posting on social, I put a lot less energy into it now that I used to, because it can be a little draining. And I'm going like all in on email marketing, which is also like that content usually is repurposed from social media. And then the other thing I do is I'm changing the strategy now, but for the last 10 months or 11 months, I was running free workshops every month. So that was a really good like anchor for my content strategy. So when I was looking at like, what is my minimum viable to make sure that I'm growing consistently, it was like choosing a workshop topic, promoting it via email, repurposing the email for social, and then putting out a couple blog posts that were related. And then the other thing I've been doing a lot, which I think this is content marketing, is like I realized that the second source of my email list growth and my traffic was through collaborations. So rather than just like Facebook, it was through specifically bundles and summits. And so as kind of a branch of content marketing for me is like figuring out where I can participate in collaborations, and then also starting to create collaboration. So it's like content marketing on steroids, I guess, like putting together a bunch of people.
So I'm struggling right now, specifically this past week, posting these really good posts, I think, on LinkedIn and like getting nothing. And I know, Alison, you like in the past, I've seen really good posts from you, like beautiful pictures, wonderful thoughts, and like the reactions that you get on some of those weren't really high on LinkedIn. And maybe what like Danny.
I thought they're consistently low on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
especially.
So it's interesting because, so that's what I'm saying. It's interesting that you're moving away from social, but that's something in particular that I know about you. Like just being on LinkedIn and seeing like, wow, this is like, she's doing everything that technically is right, but for some reason she's not getting that. Why am I even bringing about this? It's not to like, poke a wound, but it's more like, I'm sure there's so many people who feel that way. We're like, we put all this effort, especially on LinkedIn, and sometimes it just doesn't come out. Like, how does that make you feel? How did you kind of like feel good about like moving away from that? Just to give some practical advice.
Even though I frequently repurpose content across platforms, but I usually only care about a couple. And I think that's been really helpful for like, to me, LinkedIn is like extra credit. I actually just met with my therapist before this, who I was talking about audience borrowing and how I was excited about this thing that I did. He was like, "Oh yeah, I actually like full disclosure, because therapists and clients aren't like
Right.
chilling on the internet." But apparently somebody in his network shared something of mine, so we must have a common connection. He saw my content, and I was like, I actually loved that because it was such a good reminder. Like my LinkedIn engagement, I've got clients who are like super worried about theirs. And I'm like, girl, let me just show you how low mine is. Like my biggest speaking engagement to date was somebody who found me on LinkedIn and asked me to speak in front of a group of 80 people. And they found me on LinkedIn. And my LinkedIn is like, I've got a ton of connections. That my engagement is hot garbage. But for me, what I care about is like one or two platforms. So in 2022, I was putting a lot of attention and energy into Instagram. And that's part of why I've retracted my energy so much from social, because when I looked at my numbers for 2022, I was like, that is the lowest traffic source, email list. I mean, I was like, Instagram, you betrayed me for all of my effort that I put in. So I think it's really helpful to know that a lot of your buyers too, like a lot of the people that buy from me are not the people that are reacting to the posts. The people who are reacting to the post, the people who I love with all my heart because they see me, but a lot of them haven't bought from me and will never buy from me. They're just wonderful people who love my free content.
So it's important to remember that even if you don't get a bunch of reactions, people are still seeing it and you're still implanting on them. So I think that's a really good and important thing to remember. It's hard. Like that's the downside of social, right? It's kind of like, it is another drug where it's like, you post something and you wish like a bunch of people, but it's not, then, you forget about it Or you just forget about, you could still be touching and reaching people even if they don't actually react.
Yeah. Consistency beats skill every time. And I've had people tell me, I love that this one person in particular who's been following me forever. He's like, I love that you always show up like there's a bunch of people there, even if there's nobody there. And I'm like, yeah, because I don't care about the initial thing. It's all about there's all these things that happen after that piece of content goes out, or that can be repurposed. So nobody shows up to my live. Sometimes I don't even promote when I'm going live, but it's all about what you learned doing it, who's going to see it later. And then as far as engagement, there are ways to kind of hack engagement. So if you're going all in on LinkedIn, it's your main thing, the only thing you're doing, and it's worth putting your energy into, there are ways to kind of curate more engagement. Generally speaking, I don't know if it's worth it, but I do have hacks for most platforms on if you want your engagement to be higher, there's tips you can use.
Do you want to share maybe one or two for LinkedIn?
Yeah, and I guess they're similar for a lot of them. So Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, the ways to help your engagement are creating conversations. So if you can have DM conversations that are authentic, don't do what you're getting on LinkedIn. Do you want 100 booked appointments every day?
Yeah, get a million of those.
Nobody wants those. Nobody wants 100 appointments a day. But starting genuine conversations, it helps, especially on Facebook, I found it helps my organic reach a lot, which I don't use that strategy anymore. Proactively making new connections, commenting on other people's posts, and then hosting collaborations. All those things will help with engagement. And if you have one platform that you're really invested in, pushing people to that platform from your email list. So for example, if I want to grow YouTube, then pushing people to the newest videos that I do. But you can do the same thing on LinkedIn. Even I have a client who will email his email list a link to just an individual post to try to get more reactions on it.
That's smart. Instead of sending them, let's say, to the video, but to send them to the post. But the cool part here, Alison, is that you can actually do this outside of social media, and your 2022, which is, I'm so glad to hear.
Yeah.
So is there anything you find many of your new clients are missing out on in the world of content marketing? Is there maybe a common theme or thread?
Audience borrowing. So with a lot of my clients who are doing everything else right, but they want to grow their email list faster, I think audience borrowing is a big missed opportunity. If they are doing audience borrowing and they wonder why it's not working, it's usually because they don't have a focus of how am I using this?
So Alison, let's define audience borrowing for those people who don't know what it is.
So audience borrowing for me is collaborating with someone who is complementary but not competitive, where you can help each other grow on your preferred platform.
How can you use audience borrowing to your advantage?
My favorite way to use it is to try to grow your email list. It depends on what your primary platform is, but I would say there's lots of different ways you can leverage audience borrowing. So podcasting, hello, good example. But then making sure that when I'm on the podcast, I'm giving Danny a link to my lead magnet or whatever I want the audience to know about. Guest blogging, which I feel like everybody has heard about, but I feel like it's a little bit harder to do these days. Bundles and summits, shout outs. And another really underutilized example of audience borrowing is just email swapping. So find someone who's a similar size to you and then trade lead magnets. I feel like that's so underutilized that I have to explain it to people. But in order to get more sales with the same offers you have now, you've got to get in front of more people. And you can either wait for the algorithm, run paid ads, or find people to audience borrow with.
You take your list, you advertise their offer, and then they take their list and they advertise your offer, and it's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
And do you think in general, are people open to that?
They are. I find that it takes a lot of explaining, which is why I created a $9 course on it so that more people can learn about it. AlisonReeves.co/everything, which has everything that I have, and that's near the top. But yeah, once I explain it, you just have to, and there's scripts in that course on how to ask people to do the things, so you don't have to. Otherwise, it can get really complicated and convoluted, because you can also do audience borrowing where I'll send my email list your lead magnet, but maybe your email list is really tiny, but you have a huge Instagram following. So I'll send my email list your lead magnet and you'll do a shout out on Instagram for mine, for example.
How do you feel ethics plays into audience borrowing? Obviously, it's kind of taking what people opted into you, didn't necessarily opt into someone else.
Well, you want people to self-select.
Okay.
So I'm not going to, if you and I were going to do a trade, I would not give you my email address, my email list. I would email my list a link to your opt-in, and they can decide if they want it or not. And then everything else from there is just normal disclosure. Like, you're going to be put on my newsletter list. This is how many emails I send out.
Do you ever find that your audience gets annoyed when you're pushing other people's offers?
They haven't yet, but I'll keep you updated. I just did this huge bundle where I was promoting 20 other people's
Oh,
offers,
wow.
and I've gotten a lot of feedback that people were really grateful that it was organized and had access to new resources, and they're good. I think part of the ethics of that too is vetting the people to at least to some degree. I can't control the quality of everybody's business, but
True, but I'm sure knowing you, Alison, you're going to choose people to promote that you feel comfortable. You're not going to sell yourself out.
I try to. I try my best.
We're all human, but
Yeah.
if we're hitting that 90-95%, I think that's really good. Let's talk about podcasting a bit. I know that you have a podcast, the Mind Your Marketing podcast, and we have a podcast, obviously. How do you think podcasts play into content marketing and digital marketing in general?
I think podcasts they're one of so in general, I think people need to focus on some kind of long form evergreen type of content for content marketing, and then some kind of short term win. So if you can balance those two, it's almost like the hunting versus the gardening of marketing, where hunting is for the short term, gardening is for the long term, so you don't have to hunt quite as much. And podcasting to me is one of those gardening platforms where the content is out there forever. It can grow unexpectedly a year from now, whereas that can happen with short form content as well. But yeah, to me, it's very similar to blogging in that regard. And it's also really easy to repurpose podcasts into other types of content. I think unlike blogging, there's a little more trust built in a platform where people can learn your personality. I think that's what podcasting does. And the other great thing about podcasting, as opposed to a long form content like blogging, is that if you're interviewing people, there's inherently audience borrowing built in. If you're good at educating your guests and or being a guest.
Yeah, my worst thing is when I have a guest and I really think that they're going to be promoting the episode and they don't. It really hurts.
Yeah. I'm very explicit. I'm still kind of figuring out. So I launched my podcast last year and it was growing, but I was just I wasn't totally enjoying the interviews. And then it took I had 2 interviews in a row, which didn't get posted. So I'm not identifying anybody, but where I felt like the person was definitely on just to promote themselves. And so the conversation was sticky. I almost didn't feel like I could even be a part of the conversation with the guest. So I've been trying to play with a format that feels more fun. I'm still kind of experimenting with what that looks like.
Yeah, I think number one, it's got to be someone that you enjoy talking with. I get tons of emails of pitches. Oh, well, this person, he's an expert and he's, hopefully I will never have to use those people. But for me, it's always been people around my network, people that I know. You want to enjoy actually going and having that conversation. If you're going to be dreading it, it's going to be impossible to sustain.
Yeah.
So clearly we don't believe it, but some people will say that the podcast market is over full or saturated. How do you respond to someone with that mindset?
I think it's hard for any market to get oversaturated. I'm trying to think of people have said that blogging is oversaturated. People have said that it's too late to go viral on TikTok but there's just opportunity. You can carve out your space. And like anything, if you don't quit, you won't fail. You just have to keep going until you figure out your thing. I don't think podcasting is oversaturated at all. I still kind of feel like people are still kind of getting into it for the first time and listening and finding what they want. I think there's a ton of opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. So not all of your podcast guests are women. How do you think that particular element of our identities, gender expression, plays into podcasting and marketing in general?
Yeah. I'm thinking, so for me, it's I don't think I say in very few places that I target women, but obviously I attract mostly women. I do have male clients. I've got 2 men in a mastermind out of 6 people, but for the most part, my audience is largely women. I think I've only had 1 male podcast guest. And the story that I make up about that, although I haven't thought a lot about it, is because I have a heart-centered approach and a kind of a feely approach to a lot of the way that I talk about things. And I think women are more naturally attracted to and inclined to connect with that. Yeah. And I'm also curious if the places where I'm finding guests are mostly women. I mean, my email list, I'm sure if I looked at the stats, it would be 90-95% women. And that's probably just who I naturally attract because I'm a little woo-woo and very feminine in how I talk about things. So I think the men that find me and connect with me are the men who also have a heart-centered approach, or they're drawn to that And that's consistently true among the men that I work with.
Yeah, they're going to have to appreciate that aspect of you in order to sign up. But I feel like a lot of men do, just some are scared to admit to it.
Mm-hmm.
So segueing into sort of our lightning round, but it's going to be a little bit different today. So for people who don't know, Alison is a musician. She was part of a church band for many years, and now she is doing performances out of church in more mainstream venues. Yeah, let's talk about what are the top 3 things you like about music, performing?
I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is how music is such a universal language. So I went to Kenya in 2004, and I've been to Mexico a bunch of times. And I felt like when we were singing music and playing music together, it just felt like we didn't have to worry about language at all. Like we were just connecting on that. And similarly, like my favorite thing about music is just playing with other people. Like I like playing by myself in my office, but playing with someone and like singing together, like playing our instruments together and just connecting with people in that way, like creating art together organically is like my favorite thing in the world. And then the other thing I love about music for me is just expression. It feels like one of the most spiritual things that I do is enjoy and appreciate music in any way, whether that's singing something I love, writing something from my heart, or even just dancing and movement. Like music, I just feel like music makes me feel more connected than anything else in the world.
You just, I guess, awoke a memory in my head in the middle of COVID. So we actually spoke about Clubhouse, the social media platform. It kind of doesn't exist anymore, but it was very big during COVID. But I remember like Thursday nights, there was this group. It was called like the Campfire Group. And people would take turns getting on stage and singing or playing music.
Aw.
And I don't know, just the mentioning of like the spirituality and the awakening just kind of like reminded me like, ooh, there were some good Thursday nights during 2020 where like people were bonding over this, audio app and music. And I even had a couple chances to play and sing. And yeah, it's so powerful. It is, music is truly a gift. And, the more we can surround ourselves with it, I think the better.
Yeah. Oh, that's a cool memory.
Before we wrap up, what would you say, Alison, is your next big project?
Next big project, I'm launching a new offer called the Art of Attraction. So it'll have a course, but it's also a mentorship, and it's like the lowest cost coaching I've ever done because I'm kind of moving into a new niche. And then in October, I'm organizing a collaborative course. So I'm organizing up to 30 people, maybe more, to create a course together that we will all co-launch. And it will all be all about mindset and energetics for entrepreneurs. So I'm really excited about that.
So, Alison, where can listeners learn more about you and your business?
AlisonReeves.co. My social media is linked there. I created a page where everything is linked. I just got tired of like having to depend on launches all the time. And so I'm really excited about that page. It's AlisonReeves.co/everything, where you can find all my free offers and paid offers organized by topic.
Well, Alison, this was such a great conversation, so deep. And like, sometimes I do these and I like the time, like it takes a little bit longer, but here it's like, what? We've already spoken this long? Like, and I could speak even longer. So I'm glad it was one of these types of episodes. But yeah, thank you so much for being a guest on the Digital Marketing Mentor. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into the Digital Marketing Mentor. We'll talk to you next time.